Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. Well then, here we are, the current expansion. It's been quite a journey in review so far. We've seen the good, the bad and the downright ugly. Battle for Azeroth is WoW's 7th expansion and promised so much in the way of new content and new places to explore, but was everything so good once you really started to dig in? I think for this episode I'll try and make an effort to go over the main points that deserve merit or criticism for the expansion, instead of going into full detail on every single little thing that may have made the other videos a bit too long previously. There is plenty of content out there for BFA at the moment on the internet, and well, not a lot of it is going to be looked very favourably upon, let's just put it that way. But we need to start from the start here, as is tradition. Legion had treated us pretty well, I would say, a nice rebound expansion after Warlords of Draenor, and the send-off Legion gave us with the cinematic waiting at the end of Antorus the Burning Throne really hyped up that hype to levels we hadn't seen for a new expansion in many a year. Not only this, but it held the promise of an expansion location that had been speculated as a thing ever since as far back as vanilla, that being the faraway lands of Kultiris and a troll empire in its full glory, Zandalar. Even the box art for the game was a clear throwback to Warcraft orcs and humans. On top of this, it looked to be a promise to bring us back to the good old-fashioned faction war that World of Warcraft started with. It wasn't just going to be another us versus the next big bad guy expansion, right? It was going to be truly themed to have some conflict, which may have concerned some PvE players at heart, since it feels like, despite the game lore-wise being based around these conflicts, in practice these days people want to, for the most part, collect different coloured horses, play transmog, and do just PvE stuff. But we can talk about how all this played out soon enough. The hype, though, certainly played up to expectations though, with Battle for Azeroth achieving a new day one record number of sales for the World of Warcraft franchise, with 3.4 million units sold worldwide. Players are set off into the story of BFA with high hopes, and I have to say the leveling journey from 110 to 20 was a good one, especially that first time through the new zones. BFA did try something new in this regard, in that each faction had 3 main questing zones to go through on their way to the new level cap. There was also the war campaign thrown in there too, where you would travel over to the opposite faction zones and get a little bit of an introduction to how things looked over there for them. For the Alliance, we had Tirigard Sound, Drusvar and Stormsong Valley, Horde, Zuldazar, Vol'dun and Nazmir. And just as certain teams at Blizzard have been doing so for years and years, and I bet you knew I was going to be saying this, how could you say otherwise? Wow, Kultiris and Zandalar look and sound amazing. This is some of the best work from the art and music teams yet. I remember that first time I was leveling on a midnight or so release, if I recall correctly, just stopping and staring over Tirigard Sound, the music, the snow falling, looking over Borealis in the distance. You could really feel how sort of cool and fresh it would have felt to be there. And that feeling was very much reciprocated in other zones as well, Drusvar being ominous and spooky, Vol'dun arid and desolate, Nazmir swampy and sort of humid feeling. There wasn't all that many zones though, especially when they were faction locked. That certainly could have been a complaint, which I understand. But for what they offered, I have to say that I liked it. There were also so many good ways to level in this expansion, and XP was just thrown at you after a while with heirlooms, war mode, XP potions, time walking, incursions and so on. You could get to level cap in a day with a bit of grinding, even as a returning player. The theme of the zone-wide story was there too, which I enjoyed seeing fully through, at least the first time. Bonus objectives were now a mainstay of the game too, which I very much welcomed, as well as flying being locked behind the Pathfinder achievement, which I'm okay with personally. I know some people really hate this, I guess it depends. Some of the zones in the game did feel like they were in part designed with flying in mind, which made them a bit annoying to traverse, but hey, at least we got over that eventually. You know what else I liked? Well, in theory anyway, war mode. What this did is replace PvP servers as a new toggle on or off opt-in system for PvP. You could only toggle it in capitals and it would give you bonus XP, reputation and let you use your PvP talents out in the world. If I can tell you one thing from playing PvP servers nowadays in Classic, is that people constantly bang on about when not on a PvP server there's no risk in the open world. There's also no reward either. World PvP has already beaten itself to non-existence in Classic. PvP in of itself isn't an adequate reward, especially when it's so imbalanced on the majority of servers numbers wise. I mean, when was the last time you saw somebody with rank 14 gear in a battleground? It just doesn't happen. A lot of people do it for the rewards. Actually having something in the way of a little bonus is a great way to incentivize people to opt in, even if they aren't too invested in the PvP side of things. Unfortunately though, in practice it didn't really work out because nobody on the Alliance wanted to PvP, even with the incentives, so Blizzard set their rewards to an enormously high level, and suddenly there became far more Alliance than Horde. So what did Blizzard do to fix the problem? They just gave the Horde those bonuses instead, and surprisingly, it went back and forth of this sort of imbalance for quite a long time. Also, some of the raids had quite memorable moments too. Uldir was the first tier of BFA, which the Horde had a massive build-up through a whole zone-wide story explaining the history of the place, the importance and why we have to deal with it, and the Alliance literally would not have known it existed in terms of lore. Really, it's never brought up at all. What was perhaps the most memorable was the fact that Uldir was the first raid where the top guilds in the world shed their secrecy and put the whole thing on the screen in the Race to World First streams, and it was a huge spectacle to behold, actually seeing what goes on behind the scenes for the top guilds in the world in order to push those top level boss kills. You got to see the preparation, the changing team comps, the strats. It was seriously cool to follow along, and I always look forward to this kind of event each tier now. Uldir had some pretty interesting fights too, Mother with the barriers that you had to go through in a staggered fashion, Fetid Devourer Mythic, which was really the first wall of the raid, which was kind of overtuned to say the least, as well as the RNG spawns it had, which sometimes just force you to wipe. Wasn't the biggest fan of that fight. Zul was definitely the most interesting boss in the instance by a long way too. It had these ads that could only die if they had a certain debuff on them, and what players would do is keep the ads alive and stack as many sub-rogues as they could to blast damage into the boss, and skip certain phases throughout the fight where very dangerous mechanics could stack up. It was one of the most widespread ways players had found to cheese a boss fight in a long time. Sub-rogues had an ability called Shuriken Combo, when where Fan and Knives hits a bunch of targets, their next Eviscerate does bonus damage, and they could get combo points so fast you were near spamming Eviscerate. I played a rather undergeared rogue ult for this fight, and the single target damage was higher than I was doing on my main in the next tier of raiding. Of course it got nerfed after a while, but we can talk about that later. Gahum was the first raid tier to be extended for a world first kill, I believe, taking Method 285 pulls to down. Battle for Azshara lore followed with an innovative new format for raids in a more faction-specific driven story, where you would change faction for certain bosses, such as being Alliance for King Rastakhan or Horde against High Tinker Mekatork. Mekatork, so that was a fight, a very unique fight with one of the biggest personal responsibility checks and a requirement to have a mic, basically. I'll tell you what made the fight special. So Mecha would call in these little zappy robots into the fight, and they have a 99% damage reduction, so traditional damage ain't gonna work. And what Mecha would do is shrink you, and you had to enter the robots as if you were entering a vehicle, and call out a sort of diffuse sequence shown above other players' robots. 3 calls in a row on a timer, and on Mythic there was 3 of these to do at once. You'd be surprised how many issues something like this could cause. The final boss was Jaina Proudmoore, played through a Horde point of view. What a fight it was. For the world first guilds, everything up to this point had taken 2 days, but Jaina, it took just after the reset and 346 wipes for Method to take their second world first this expansion. The Crucible of Storms was soon to follow, expected to be a little bit of a tie-over to the next raid tier. This short 2-boss raid ended up being the hardest fought battle so far in the expansion, with the guild pieces from Europe taking the world first kill on both bosses, Unat dropping on pull number 700 and on day 9. It was speculated at the time, due to being a short raid and Blizzard seeing the popularity of the world first race, that the difficulty was turned up to 10 to make the most out of the event, when in reality it caused more burnout than anything else for the top end guilds, since raids in BFA so far had just been hard, and regrinding Azerite power constantly, spending all day in islands, was really starting to wear thin for them. The follow-up raid was Azshara's Eternal Palace, taking place on the legendary Nazjatar, and the closest world first race we have seen yet, Method and Limit both going head to head, pull to pull, merely single-digit percentages away from a kill, but Method once again claimed victory on day 12 after 359 wipes. It was also the first raid to ever feature an underwater boss, which you probably half forgot about because it was forgettable, Blackwater Behemoth. People didn't exactly expect much running up to it, but it ended up being the easiest encounter in the entire raid. even on Mythic, so much for that idea, I guess. The final tier of BFA was the equally legendary Ny'alotha, the Waking City, and another battle against an old god to follow, N'Zoth. And well, it wasn't exactly too well looked upon for reasons apart from just the mechanics on the bosses. Football, anyone? N'Zoth lived for 10 days and 270 wipes, with Limit finally dethroning Method, but we'll talk more about that soon. And we still have plenty of points to cover. I've decided to split this one into two sections where we have the more positive sides and well-remembered aspects of Battle for Azeroth, and then we have the rest of it, shall we say. Every expansion has good and every expansion has bad, but BFA tipped that scale quite a bit in one direction, at least for me personally, and I'm sure if you watch any of the retail style of content on YouTube, then you've seen a lot more of the negative side, and unfortunately I'm going to have to echo that because that is also how I feel about it. So join me next time as we look over some of the more points to criticize in BFA and hopefully that have been learned from moving into Shadowlands from Blizzard. As always, I hope you like this video and I will see you in the next one very soon. If you like what you see, do give the video a like and subscribe as there will be plenty more to come. Take care guys, and I'll see you in the next one very soon.